Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Mignot, and this is part of my 29 Days of Magic series where I interview a Black woman a day for 29 straight days. And episode, I am so excited to have Nikki A. She's a disruptor, and I think it's the most incredible way to describe all that she does. And it's incredibly accurate as well. So I'm super psyched for you all to hear her conversation with me today. So let's get started. Hey, Nikki.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad we're finally able to do this. Took a while, but like we got here.
It'll be well worth the wait.
Totally, absolutely. So, first question is always same, answer is always amazing. Sure, yours would be no different. So, Nikki, what was your first job?
I had internships to some degree or another, even while in college, that at least gave me a taste, a flavor of what the workforce was going to be like. And then my first official paying, inclusive of benefits and a bonus and all the good stuff that comes with that, was at Merrill Lynch. I was in a HR managerial rotational program, and I rotated every 6 months for 4 assignments into different parts of the business in order to learn and to expand my network. And as much as I loved the networking and loved learning the business, I did not realize until maybe midway that I didn't like working in the financial industry. But I didn't have language like culture to understand nor appreciate, not fully. That language only really came to mind, I guess that one could say, with my fourth opportunity working after I figured out Merrill Lynch wasn't it for me. But that's a good question. You just took me back to having sweaty palms and butterflies in my stomach.
Oh no! And how did you get through all that?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm out. You didn't stay long. I'm guessing.
No, Laura, I ended up worshiping at a church, Trinity Church on Wall Street every day at noon, because that's how stressed and how uncomfortable and all the micro inequities that, again, I did not have this language at the time, I was experiencing. And I just knew I need to find where there's joy. And so I found myself at church every day worshiping just to get my mind right, to be able to go back into an office to manage people who, to use this language now, I think we're tolerating as opposed to accepting and truly embracing. But again, I did not have this language at 22, 23.
Yeah, who has that? I mean, look, we all have that. Now we do.
Yes.
But as young munchkins in the business world, it was not something that was like, let me go find somewhere to have some that has some proper equity within the
Right.
walls of the organization. Like, yeah, no, that did not exist. And also, it's like, how do we get to a point where like that goes from being beyond language but also practice and everything that we do.
Oh yes, Laura. If not for mentors, if not for having big sisters, big brothers who could say been there, done that, I don't know that I would have remained on the corporate side of things. But they were helpful in getting me to better appreciate my own skill set, my strengths, and my development areas. Insofar as finding, well, what comes next, right? Stepping stone. So if not this, then what? And I try to tell young people now, it's okay to try something and realize it's not for you. I think it's just as important for us to know what we want to do as much as it is to know what we do not want to do. And the only way you'll know that is by doing it. So while I was not comfortable and had to learn truly, ooh, girl, the art of finding my comfort in being uncomfortable, I needed to go through those experiences. So my steps were ordered in that I had to go through that so that I could be the leader and the executive that I am today. And that was truly shaped and honed at HBO, which came years after my financial missteps and scrapes, figuring out between Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley, great training ground to then sprout anew in a media and entertainment industry, which is completely different than that of the financial industry.
Yeah, you couldn't get much further away from each other than working in the gonna go
Night and
about
day.
night, day, a whole other continent, whole other time zone.
So true. True.
So you now segue into my next question. So like yeah, so once you at that first job, you're like help me, get me out of here. How did we get to be having this conversation today? What was that career journey like?
Oh, wow. So I've been very blessed, and one could say I've had a serendipitous career in that for every opportunity, whether I enjoyed it, whether I thought, oh, this is the cat's meow, or whether I felt like I've got to get out of here, I was at least thoughtful about the relationships, the networking, the way in which I was building equity, even in an industry that I'd figured out young enough wasn't for me. I knew enough that the world didn't move. You had to be mindful of how you treat people. That 6 degrees of separation in communities of color is really more like one or two. So building equity along the way with folks, I carried that with me. And so I consulted privately for almost 3 years when I realized financial wasn't it. I didn't have, excuse my French, the balls at the time to just jump into a new industry. And somehow I thought I had to figure out a way to leverage the one that I was in. And it wasn't until someone who had the magnifying glass out, who had been watching my career, watching me with all of my growing pains and with all of my struggles to fit in, to do a version of code switching, first voice, second voice, trying to figure it all out in your early 20s when you just don't know what you don't know, but you think you know everything
Of
is
course, you
the
know everything.
undercurrent, right? It took other people saying to me who were in my network, Nikki, you should think about this next opportunity, or you should consider media and entertainment. Your personality is for it. Financial was too serious, too conservative, too reserved. You got to go where your tribe is. And again, I didn't know what my tribe was because I had just graduated and was trying to figure it out, but I did know that I wanted to make money, I wanted to add value, and I wanted to feel what some people talk about as the when you do what you love, it's not work. So you get up every day excited to do it. I hadn't had that experience until this person said to me, "You need to consider HBO, Nikki." And even if you just go to the building, which was at the time was on 6th and 42nd, if you just go and sit on a bench and watch the energy of the people that walk out of this building, I really think that you should consider this as an opportunity. I remember the person who said that to me is my cousin's husband, and I thought, oh, he's crazy. How would he know all of this just to have a conversation with me about where I should be? But that was God. God was orchestrating things for me in ways that I didn't even know. My steps were already ordered, and so I just so happened to be is what I say, but God orchestrated this. I ended up going to the National Black MBA conference in 2002. I met a woman at the time. At the time, it was Time Warner, who she was no joke, very serious, a sister. You could tell that, she did not like to have her time wasted. And I rolled up on the booth and she said, "Give me your resume." We engaged in conversation for over an hour. And I really fell in love with her. And she said to me, "Nikki, I'm going to be in touch with you. We don't have opportunities every day, but when we do, I'm going to reach out to you." And I said, "Okay." Well, I didn't hear from her for a year, an entire year. And I thought, oh, my resume fell into a black hole, never to be seen or heard from again. But I thought we had such a connection. I thought she was feeling what I was feeling. And sure enough, maybe that following September, she reached out to me and she said, "Nikki, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm so and so, and I'd love for you to come in." And I said to her, "Of course I remember you. I thought we had a real connection. And then I didn't hear from you." And she said, "Oh, please, that's just how the business works. That's just how this arena is. But now I actually have something for you. So when can you come in and meet with me?" And it was as if I had talked to her 5 minutes before. So I went in. I had been told her hallway reputation was such that she only interviewed for like 7 minutes. 5 minutes she was assessing. 2 minutes she was making a decision, and you don't get too comfortable in your chair because just that fast you were out of her office. And maybe almost 2 hours later, we just had so much in common, and she allowed me to feel comfortable and vulnerable, believe it or not, in a matter of minutes. And sure enough, a few weeks later, she extended an offer to me. I started in 2003, and within 6 months, she promoted me. And I just remember the lesson in that first promotion was she came to me and she said, Nikki, you know that opportunity that I talked to you about when I met you in 2002? It's coming to fruition now. There's someone going to B school. They're in a position that I think you would be great for. You'll be moving away from recruiting and stepping into employee relations, hence the promotion. She said, and I just think you're right for it. You know what I told her? Oh my God, I just didn't know what I didn't know, Laura. I said to her, but I just got here. And I'm making friends and I'm building my network. And just about everybody loves working here. And they all want to be promoted too. I just got here. And she said, what are you saying? I said, well, I'm just sharing with you that I happen to know that there are these other people who might want this job. And she said, but who am I talking to? Who's sitting in my office across from me? You. So you either want this opportunity or you don't. I'm not talking to everyone else. And I thought, oh my God, it was one of those defining moments of you did the work, you're here, don't let this opportunity pass you by. There's enough to go around. Own your experience, take your power back and say yes. Even though you're scared, you don't know what it means, you don't know necessarily what the role is going to bring. Sometimes you just have to step out on faith and say yes. And in the process, I did, and I was able to take care of those who were around me that I was worried about. And so it was an opportunity for me, but it ended up being an opportunity for quite a few of us. And I lead with lifting as I climb. And every promotion thereafter pretty much happened in a version of that. A leader who I didn't know was watching would say to me, I see you. And that mattered to me as a young Black woman who maybe didn't even fully understand her own strength. For someone else to say, I see you and here's where I think you should be. I just got on board and went with the flow. And 16 years later, continue to love every day of my experience with HBO.
Awesome.
I know that was a lot, Laura.
That was a lot. That's okay. It's your journey. There isn't a time limit on your journey and what you want to share and how you feel about sharing. And again, it's the same thing. And I love that you touched on a lot of really important points. Obviously, lifting as you climb is of paramount importance, and folks need to understand that that means simple stuff. Like if you have a party and you're going to it and it's a work thing, bring a friend if you can. It means if you get an opportunity to do something and you can bring a plus one, bring a friend. If you are on a project and you can bring someone along, bring them along. I think sometimes people assume that they have to be at a certain level before they can bring people along, and it's like that is not how this works.
Exactly right. That's right.
Just be good by people. And I saw a note this morning from someone who used to work for me, and she has now got the most amazing job. And I'm so proud of her. And I wrote it publicly, and she's just like, you have no idea what it meant to use to write that note. Simple shut. Like it isn't hard to be good to people and bring them along for the ride. So I think that's so important. Now, obviously, I'm guessing in the last, decade or so, and the work that you've done, things have not always been easy. So can you talk to me about a time when you had a challenge where like, there's no way you're getting through, and then you did?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Just the transition, leaving a place that I called home for sweet 16 years. We were purchased at the time, right now, went from Time Warner to Warner Media, AT&T swooped in. And what I can tell you is that was probably, not only was it a challenge, not only was it a hurdle, but the idea of calling a place home for however many years and feeling very much like the people that you work with are family. It was difficult for me to make the decision to transition away from HBO and enter into a role that prior to being asked to consider it, I would have never thought that's my path. And so the beauty of back to my career and how serendipitous it's been, it was me being on the board of the Emma Bowen Foundation at the time representing HBO. Their at the time, CEO and president had asked me to consult when I was leaving HBO, and I said yes. Fast forward, he then asked if I would consider being on a short list to be considered for the interim CEO and president. And I remember my answer at the time was no. And it was an emphatic no with an exclamation.
Wow.
And it was now hindsight 2020 looking back that I realized I could have easily gone down a path out of fear or out of not truly embracing what was next for me and allowing fear to trip me up. And instead, I called upon my network, the very network that you're talking about, the people who go with you and travel with you, that talk you off the ledge and take you into rooms where you may not have had access on your own. It was in that journey that I realized my 16 years and then my 4 years in the financial industry had actually been preparing me for the role that I'm in now, but I was about to get in my own way. And so the challenge was, it's not something I'd planned for. It wasn't something that I went in search of. So it didn't feel like it was supposed to naturally be a part of my journey. And so, if not for having people around me who, again, the theme here is could see me in ways that maybe I couldn't even see myself, I could have easily said no to what has been the most rewarding and fulfilling opportunity, because on its face, I didn't see the marriage, I didn't see the union. And again, it took someone else to say to me, you're walking away from a gift. You're walking away from such an opportunity for you to flex on all the skills and all the relationships and all the learnings that you are the sum total of your experiences. This is now an opportunity for you to leverage all of that. And you don't see that yourself. And so, again, sometimes we can get in our own way when we may not see the bigger picture. And it took someone else saying to me, this is the right next step for you. You don't have aspirations of leading HR. You don't have aspirations of being a chief diversity officer, but you do want to run a business. Where do you go when you're already senior in an organization? What do you pivot to? And so many of us can just allow fear to get in the way of saying yes. And I chose to use that fear to say yes, even though I didn't know what I didn't know. I stepped out on faith and landed in this role. And then who knew that COVID would hit 2 weeks into my having said yes. But the reason that I share this story with you, Laura, is Emma Bowen was a Black woman from Harlem who was so hell-bent on ensuring that we, people of color, could see each other both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Given my career very much behind the camera in that sense of media and entertainment, overseeing talent management, I was behind the scenes. So to then have to step out and be the face of an organization and leverage all this experience was scary. It was very scary. And it was for that very reason that I said yes. So it could have been a hot mess had I not. I would not have been able to have the thumbprint. I would not have been able to be influenced by these young people in ways that I would have gotten in my own way. And so my challenge was having to step back and be okay with a more non-traditional approach. And it was okay to move from corporate to not-for-profit and be just as successful in the transition and take my relationships with me for the betterment of this larger body of young people of color who can leverage both me and my network, as opposed to me just taking another corporate job that would have been, I'm sure, fulfilling, but not the way that this feeds my soul now. So when I think back to 2020 and my emphatic no, that would have been the error. That would have been me getting in my way. And I'm very grateful that I chose to move in a different direction. And now it's been 4 years of me being able to pour into these young people in ways that people have poured into me.
I love that. I love that. And I love that. And I think it's so necessary because this is one of those fundamental things where we forget how awesome we are. And it takes somebody else to be like, no, girl, you can do this. And it's important to have those moments of being like, oh, you know what? You're right. Because when these opportunities show up, and I use myself as another example, because I was like, really? It's not right for me, but here I am. As listening to those folks in that network that we've built, so when their opinion counts, and when you hear it from them, it almost seems like it's even more truth because it's coming from them.
100% right, Laura. And, you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. And it's important that we keep people around us that can tell us about our shit. Excuse my French, but we're grown. That can tell you,
Yep.
you're stepping in it, or don't move in that direction, or I have an 80,000-foot view and you think you have an 80,000-foot view, but I'm over you. So I can see things that you can't, and I need you to trust the process. If I didn't have trusting relationships, if I didn't have a network that trusted me, I don't know where I would be, right? But there's that saying, you want to go fast, you go alone. I didn't want to move fast. I wanted to move with purpose. And I think sometimes we can think we're moving with purpose until someone taps you on the shoulder and says, I see your talents being used elsewhere. So, yeah, it's important to keep people around us that are going to tell us what we need to hear and not what we want to hear.
Yep.
And it took me
Need
a little
versus
bit
the
of time
want
to get there. Yes. Yes.
is so important, and it's so very true. In talking about, everything that you've done, talk to me about what you'd probably tell 18-year-old Nikki.
Get out of your head. Sit at the damn table. You think everyone in here knows more than you, and they might. Take a risk. Say it anyway. Act like you belong. Even when you don't, fake it till you make it. Too often, that those girl, I'm so honest, right? Those vulnerable feelings of, am I the smartest person in the room? Do I deserve to be here? You almost can build up these giants around you. And back to your earlier point, complimentary of mine, you do need some people who are clapping for you, who can remind you, take your power back, right? Like, there is a reason you're in the room. So if you're going to be in the room, then you have to leverage your voice. And I think early in my career, I waited for permission. And at some point, not 18 Nikki, but certainly maybe 25, 30-year-old Nikki got to a place where you give yourself permission. Who are you waiting to grant you access? You already have it. So now if you're not using it, whose fault is that? My fault. And that's a harder nut to crack when you're getting in your own way. You see my theme here, right? About getting in my own way. I'm clear around what it looks like, because looking back, I could see the moments where I did just that. I got in my own way. So I try to tell young people what I would have wanted someone to tell me, which, by the way, I'm sure I had more than enough mentors and sponsors that were telling me that, and I just couldn't hear it. I wasn't in a place to
To hear
process
it.
it. Hello.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
And look, I think that, again, it's always about giving ourselves the grace that at that moment, but also, the learnings of 2020 hindsight are different. We'd all do things differently, but like, we wouldn't be sitting here if we had done things differently. So we take the good with the bad, and we never lose. We learn.
So, so true. So true. And we learn to take what could easily become a killer moment, a sucker punch moment where you can't recover or you don't recover. We've got to learn to pack our tool case with, it's okay to be here. And even if I make a mistake or I misstep, it's okay. It's part of my journey. It's part of those growing pains that we talked about. And I don't think I was always as gracious with myself around mistakes. I had to learn to celebrate failure in ways that we're not taught it's okay to do, whether you're in school, in college, in graduate school, certainly not when you first start working. If anything, the goal is not to make a mistake. But the truth is, that's the only way you really learn. I realized early in my career, Laura, that while I love positive reinforcement and I too need to be told what I do well, and at times very much need to be reminded because I can be hard on myself, I actually respond. I don't know if this is good or bad, but like, I respond to constructive feedback. It's like, oh, I actually have to go and think about that and then figure out a way to go from point A to point B. And then I got to tell people about it, or who's going to hold me accountable. That's where the people we choose to be around, my best friends, my girls since I was 8, my husband, we have knockdown dragouts, right? I had to go to therapy to learn to fight fair because I had to be okay with feedback, especially when it's not the pat on the back and the, oh my God, girl, you killed it. What happens when you're not killing it, right? What happens when you truly, you misstep in a major way? How do you forgive yourself? So I had to learn to do that first and know what it feels like, that panic feeling of like, I just fucked up, in order to not want to have that feeling again. But in order to get there, I had to go through the heart racing, sweaty palms, nervous stomach, nervous energy before I could realize it's okay. Forgive yourself first, and then it makes it easier, believe it or not, to forgive others. And I do mean in the workplace, but that transfers, that energy transfers at home. And too many of us think how we show up at work is not how we show up at home. But I think our spouses and partners and significant others would beg to differ.
Oh, so true. So very, very true. So you're imparting all this amazing wisdom on everybody and pouring into great people and pouring into young people, especially. What does Nikki do for Nikki? What do you do for your self-care?
Such a good question, Laura. I have learned over the years to not skimp on self-care. So I've adopted the theory of being selfish is self-care. So
Bingo.
every 2 weeks or so, my husband and I bring in a masseuse who has now become part of the family. They come with all the accoutrements, the table, the sheets, all the smell goods, the oils, the whole nine. It's literally a massage in a bag. And he does a pop up in your home. And we have now gotten to the place where he comes every 2 weeks. We each get massages 2 hours a piece. So there is no skimping on the self care. And I'm also a shopper. I find going shopping with my girlfriends, it doesn't matter if it's truly Target, if we're talking Hallmark, if we're talking Papyrus, it really doesn't matter where. I like shopping, it's therapeutic. And then last but not least, I would tell you I am a spiritual person. I'm not a Bible thumper. I'm not quoting chapter and verse, although I could. I am rooted in a sense of there is a higher power, and I believe in God, and I believe that He, she takes care of me. So I worship. I have a community of folks that I worship with, and have been doing that since before I could even tell you how old I was. I've been a part of St. Philip's, and they're very much a part of my community. And the reason that I tell you that is I have a 10-year-old. My parents both passed away shortly after. My mom passed away when I was 5 months pregnant. My dad passed away 2 years later. So Sydney doesn't have grandparents on my side, and unfortunately, a similar situation on her father's side. So where my daughter gets poured into by elders, and I do mean elders of the church, are in church. So church becomes a refuge for me and a solace. So I include that as part of my self-care.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Oh, you're just full of amazing wisdom. I gotta ask you about this, like, 2 weeks massage person comes to your house. Can they come to my house?
Absolutely happy to share. I am not a selfish. I will share, especially self-care resources. You got it.
Okay, awesome. Cause girl, like, that's like hitting the jackpot. Um,
Oh, and
um,
I didn't say it, but I'm a fan of therapy. I grew up in a home where Caribbean on both sides, my mom, dad, and then I had the nerve to marry a Guyanese. But something about in my right, like I just kept it all in the family. But Laura, and look, again, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school here. Therapy was something that was not discussed at
right.
Thanksgiving dinner. It was not discussed at Christmas dinner, Easter dinner. We did not talk about it at night, and we ate dinner as a family every night. It was taboo. It's akin to, you don't discuss politics, religion, and race at work for all the obvious reasons. But even that
Right.
is now old school. And if you're not engaging in those conversations, frankly, you're not a part of the solution.
Right.
So I had to learn the hard way that you have to walk intentionally around those. And so, yes, I take all that with me when I walk into rooms, but I appreciate that there was a time that we were not encouraged to do a version of self-reflection or to figure out our part in the melee. And so I am a fan of therapy. My husband is a fan of therapy, and I think we're married, to make the final point, for all the years that we have, and we've stayed together in part because we've gone to therapy together, and it really does become the undercurrent of our relationship. So I'm a fan of therapy for everybody, regardless as to race, ethnicity, religion. We can all stand to do a self check in the spirit of being a better person. So I just want to make sure I don't forget to add that.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things, again, we're trying to do here on the show as well is, because I have a lot of Caribbean people on the show, and we all know therapy. What's therapy? That doesn't happen in Caribbean households. But now is like, first gen, second gen kids,
That's right.
very much showing that like it's necessary. Lord, it is.
That's
Goodness.
right. I'm glad you said, Lord, it is, because, we were told you pray it away. We know that while prayer is powerful, and so I'm going to add a and, it's not a or, it's a prayer and therapy go hand in hand. And I think for too long, we were only subscribing to the former and not the latter. And I'm a fan of dipping into all ways of being able to be a more well-rounded person, but it does start with self-reflection. And the truth is, too many of us buy our own hype anyway, and we could stand to do a version of peeling back the onion. So because I do it, I can tell other people the benefits of it, as opposed to being a hypocrite and saying, but you should do it. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, I'm not. So
Right.
yeah, I'm a fan of
Do as I
self.
say, not as I do, is what you don't.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, I think it's, and again, that's part of the reason I do this. It's like we're going to break some of these stigmas down. Like, look, my faith means a ton to me, but also talking to somebody kind of important.
That's right. That's right. And to someone who has been through what you've experienced, I think too often we take advice professionally and personally from people who haven't walked our journey. Like, getting advice from someone who's not married. I'm not saying that you can't advise me and that there won't be sage guidance that comes with that person. I just need to think twice, short of you having been married and having had a successful marriage, even a not so successful marriage. You have to be mindful where you decide to take counsel from, and hold fast to hoping that that person's actually experienced what you are, such that they're qualified to even advise you about what you should be thinking about insofar as next steps. I think sometimes, it's the blind leading the blind.
Yes, it is. Last question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
I do.
Go for it.
I have an ask. If anyone listening who's in the living room who does not have a mentee or even a sponsor, someone who is looking out for you, that as they get pulled up, you get pushed up. We have to be thoughtful about these 360 relationships. And if we're only taking care of ourselves, how are we contributing to the larger good? So I would like to challenge everyone, if you're not pouring into someone younger than you, who may need you in ways you don't even know, just take inventory of who is in your cipher, who's in your social circle that might need someone that has your temperament, your expertise, your skill set. How are you sharing God's gifts that you have? Or are we holding on to them, waiting for that special moment? We create those special moments on our own. We don't have to wait for them to happen. We can create them. So, my challenge, my ask, is to pour into someone that you see might need it. And then, if you aren't being full, your cup should also be full. Make sure you're being just as kind to yourself about the resources around you and the people resources around you. And who are you tapping into to help inspire you, either ensure that your ladder is up against the right wall, or who's going to help you build a bridge to yet another. Too often we don't think about ourselves, we're thinking about others. And I think there's room enough for the and not the or. So we should be lifting ourselves up while we're also lifting up others.
I think that's brilliant and wonderful and so necessary and so true. It's, we all need each other and we all need our squads. And they are comprised of different folks from different walks of life, but also different ages. And it becomes a virtuous circle when we do all that. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, Nikki.
Laura, I'll just say one last thing. And, I've learned over the years, people who, are my age or older, who don't necessarily have anyone in their network who goes back to childhood with them, makes me a little nervous. I appreciate having friends that I went to camp with from 8 that I still have relationships with and hang out with, because you got to have people who can say they knew you before you
Knew you
were
when.
going to be. Yes, you got to have people who say, I knew you before you were who you are today, before you even could dream about who you were going to be. Something about tethered relationships goes a long way, both to keep you balanced and to give you the perspective that you need. God forbid your head gets too big, which I've been there too. And you need that good girlfriend who's going to say, what? Let me pull you right back on down to earth, right? You'd rather someone who loves you tell you that than have a stranger have to put you in your place. So thank you for having me here, Laura. I appreciate you even being remotely interested in my journey.
Oh, girl, please. Thank you for being part of 29 Days of Magic and imparting some wonderful wisdom. And again, showing what success looks like and what career journeys look like that are never linear and can fill up and be surprising and delightful in so many beautiful ways. So thank you for being part of the show. We'll put you in all the show notes. People can connect with you. And that is our show.